Hi and welcome back to another AnyRPG Development Livestream. In these videos, I livestream the development of the AnyRPG Engine, a 100% free and open source role-playing game engine designed in Unity and written in C#. These videos are unscripted and give you a chance to take a behind-the-scenes look at the unfiltered, methodical side of software development. For more information on AnyRPG, be sure to check out AnyRPG.org, where you can find documentation on the engine, links to the full source code at the official GitHub repository, and downloads of AnyRPG Alpha, a free game designed to showcase the capabilities of the AnyRPG engine. If you'd like to see more of this type of content in the future, be sure to like the videos, subscribe to the Cohesion YouTube channel, or just leave a message in the comments telling me what you'd like to see. In today's episode, we will be hopefully finishing up the NPC Equipment Manager, which is the conversion of the Equipment Manager from a singleton to something that can be placed on any character to allow them to sheath and unsheath their weapons. First though, I need to fix a mistake that I made in the previous video, and this was a little bit of a surprise to me. Unity, basically everything that you see anywhere in Unity in the inspector, you can copy and you can paste properly. So I was just copying and pasting these position, rotation, and scale values and then just setting them directly in the code in the Equipment Manager. And the problem is that for some reason, Unity has decided that in only this one specific case here with a rotation field, they're going to show you a bunch of values that you can't copy and paste. It's entirely inconsistent and it totally violates the principle of least astonishment. If you haven't heard of the principle of least astonishment, I highly recommend checking it out. It is an incredible principle in software design that basically says we don't care what your data model is, we don't care what's going on internally, but your UI should reflect something that's generally useful to the user and is going to be the least surprising thing in any given scenario or circumstance. And in this case, the fact that every single value in here you can pretty much copy and paste and use anywhere, but rotation you can't, it's a huge violation of the principle of least astonishment. So the problem is that the angles displayed here are not the Euler angles. And it says rotation here, but rotation is actually a quaternion value, and these are showing you Euler angles, but they're not the real Euler angles. So they're essentially useless, and there really isn't any reason for it to be showing these the way they are. And just to demonstrate what the exact issue is, we'll jump into the game here for a second. And I'll show you. I've got this script that where is it here? Actually, I think I have to open it here. Once Unity lets me switch back there. Yeah, show real Euler angles. Okay, let's just jump into there. So basically, we just have to grab this value right here, the transform.local Euler angles, and these values are different than what's shown in the inspector in some cases. Now, the reason that I didn't discover this until now is because the values that are shown in the inspector, in some cases, when they're basically, I think, like less than 180 degrees or greater than negative 180, they work. But I think as soon as you go over that, then Unity basically just starts reversing them or messing with them in some way that makes them incompatible with copying and pasting. So if we jump into the game here, we'll be able to see what I mean here. So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be looking at the knight here, and if we look at his maul, the knight maul, there we go. So Unity is showing you minus 14, minus 143, and positive 68. But the actual real Euler angles shown by this script, the ones that we can actually do something with, are actually 345, 216, and 68. So you can see what I mean. Like the 68 is pretty much exactly the same, but the rest of these values have been like messed with, basically. So like this one right here, it's like 360 degrees greater than that almost, or I don't know, like, but whatever the case is, these are the values that we need. So this script, show real Euler angles, I'm just going to be attaching to all of the objects in the game, and then we'll actually be able to copy and paste their values. But before this, this hammer was just like swinging wildly in all sorts of weird directions. Now, however, if we press play, we should be able to see it actually properly staying in his hand and, you know, going in the direction it needs to, staying in his glove there, facing the right way. So now that we have that problem solved, and we can see that our knight over here is properly swinging his hammer at the zombie, I think the next step is we should give the paladin over here the ability to sheath and unsheath his sword. So to do that, we're going to need to make weapons for the paladin. So we have this holdable object right here, Night Maul. We're just going to make a copy of that by hitting Control D, and we're going to call this the Paladin Sword. And I'm just going to leave all those values for now. Next thing we need to do is we need to create, this was a holdable object, so we'll go ahead and create the weapon. So we look at the Night Maul weapon over here, Control D to duplicate, and rename that to Paladin Sword. And this being a weapon, we should actually give it some sort of icon here. So we'll just check, what do we have? We've got a whole pile of swords, and see if we can find anything that looks sort of even remotely close to it. This iron sword, I think this is probably the closest one right here. And now that we're using this, this is in our unused external content, so I think the first thing I'm just going to do is just make a duplicate of that and prefix it with AnyRPG so that we know that we're using this. Being a free game, it's really important to me that I track where the content I'm using comes from. And one of the ways that I do that is I have like an unused external content, which is just a repository of stuff that I've downloaded from the Unity asset store that I think might be useful in the future. And then I'm just prefixing this with AnyRPG, and then I can pull this stuff up into, I'll be doing this at the end basically, but after I use all this stuff, I go through in this directory here, and I just type in AnyRPG and use current directory, and then this basically tells me all of the assets in the unused content which I'm now using, and then I go through, figure out which package it came from, and then credit people on the sources page. So for now that's good. We can just go back into the Paladin Sword. Right, we got to hit all assets for that. And if you haven't seen the sources page, actually just a quick note on that, AnyRPG.com/sources lists of every single asset that's used in the game or the engine currently. And a lot of these assets are really good. So, you know, if you're looking at the Unity store and getting a little overwhelmed by the amount of free assets on there, you can always just come here and check these out. I tend to use high quality assets when I can. I'm not really into low poly stuff if I can help it. So let's go back into the game here. We got our Paladin sword. We have a nice sword icon for it, and I'm just going to switch that to the AnyRPG sword icon. And this is a heavy, let's see, two-handed sword belonging to I'm just going to call him Strong Paladin because he is technically the Strong Knight 2 character from the asset store. Let's just actually go take a look at that. There, Strong Knight 2, really cool free asset. So now that we have our sword created and we have our holdable object created, we need to go to the Paladin model here. And I just want to see if we have any prefabs in here. I don't think we have a prefab for the sword. So the knight actually came with like a separate maul for his sword. For the paladin, I think we may actually have to pull it right off of his character. So let's just go take a look at that. And to do that, we actually kind of need to look in the prefab here. I just want to see this sword is sheathed, so I just need to check and make sure that there's actually like an unsheathed version of that. So we have the paladin right here, which is the actual prefab version of him. So let's open him up here. Okay, cool. So we actually have, oh, and this actually has a name too. It's called the Bastard Sword. And great news is that our Bastard Sword here looks like it's got a separate model. Yeah, we can see it. If I just turn off the mesh render on the sheath, we can actually see the sword inside. Great. So what this means is we can just pull out this sword and make it into its own prefab, basically. So we'll just pull out the sword. And now we have a nice bastard sword. So what we'll do basically is we need to know the actual Euler values. So we'll put this show real Euler angles script on it. And actually that's kind of cool. It's showing us what looks to be the real values right now. I guess that makes sense because technically this paladin is like when we open up the oh, you know what? Sorry, I've had this scene on the wrong window. I didn't even realize that here. Let's just pop that scene window in here so you can see it. This is what I was talking about with the bastard sword scabbard, being able to turn it on and off here, and the bastard sword. So this bastard sword, technically, like we're actually in a scene right here, which is why I think this works, because this code is basically execute in edit mode, so it'll only show like in the editor. So we can copy these values, actually it looks like, into the holdable object for the bastard sword. So I'm just going to lock the inspector right here and Paladin Sword. And in fact, I think I'm even going to rename this to the Paladin Bastard Sword because that's what it's called on his character model. So let's be consistent. And actually, I'm just going to select this one right here, and we're also going to rename that and call it the Paladin Bastard Sword. And then we can, oh whoops, looks like I unlocked the inspector there. Okay, let's try that again. Paladin Bastard Sword, we will add another inspector tab over here. And this is the holdable object, so we're just going to copy in the physical position right here. You know what? That's totally the wrong values. I need to copy it into the sheathed physical position. And I should rename this holdable object so that its name actually matches what's there. So going back here, this is the sheathed physical position. And then we will grab the Euler angles out of here for the sheathed physical rotation. And since these values are relative to the parent, which is the bastard scabbard, we're actually going to use this as the attachment point, which means that when we put the sword back, it's actually going to go inside the scabbard, which is pretty cool. So if I go back to the holdable object right here, and then I just set the sheathed target bone to bastard scabbard, and it should find that when it searches the Paladin model now. And next thing we want to do basically is go into the game and put this thing into his hand. And then it looks like he's got the same bone structure as the strong knight, so R_wrist is the correct bone to have this in his hand. So that looks pretty good, and we just need to go fix the naming scheme on this one right here. And then we should be able to just jump into the game. Oh, you know what? We don't even really need to wait until we're in the game to do that. Given that he's already sort of got a grip here. Now, you know what? I am going to jump into the game and wait to do the hand positioning, just because I want to see what his hand looks like when it's actually closed, which is the grip we'll be having once we actually get in there. So we'll just jump out of the Paladin model here. And now what we need to do is we actually need to go into the Paladin unit and add an AI equipment manager for him. And we need an equipment profile name. So our strong knight has an equipment profile. Let's just go look at where that is. Right, this is in our equipment profile scriptable resource directory. So we're just going to copy that and just call it strong paladin. And then tell it that our paladin gets to equip the Paladin Bastard Sword. And then I think that's okay. I think now we can jump into the game. Okay, so let's just take a look over here. Our paladin is moving towards our guy, but he is not unsheathing his sword, it looks like. So let's take a look at our... Oh, right, of course. Our paladin is a custom version of the paladin model called Master and Passive. And so we need to also give the AI equipment manager to Master and Passive and give him the paladin bastard sword too. Yeah, because these are special prefabs that I have just for the game. Okay, let's try that. Now if we add any generic paladins, I mean they've got the equipment manager on them with that thing in it too. So let's load our game up here. Okay, Master Impassive has not yet taken out his sword. So let's bring our console over here and just look for... Yeah, I'm not seeing any messages related to him, so let's see if we can figure out what's happening here. So if I look at the paladin... oh, whoops. Ha. Yeah, right, of course. I gave him the wrong equipment profile name. His equipment profile name is actually Strong Paladin. So I suppose that would help. So let's go back into the Paladin unit, just make sure we gave him the right one. That's really interesting. It didn't save. Okay. And let's go back into Master and Passive, and this is supposed to stay Strong Paladin. Save that again. And let's hit play and see if he takes his sword out this time. Oh, you know what else we need to do? We need to go actually into the master. No, okay, that's cool. We already have Master and Passive is just directly using the existing Paladin model here. So let's just go into that and just make sure that his bastard sword is disabled. And that will let us know if he's properly using the correct bastard sword model. Oh yeah, oh that's way better. Okay, cool. Now the first issue there, of course, is that my profile is referencing the wrong item. So we need to go into the profile, go into Paladin Bastard Sword, and we need to give him the Paladin Bastard Sword, not the Night Maul. So there's the Paladin Bastard Sword. And let's try that again. And then we'll see basically how the sword is looking in his hand. Interestingly enough, he's carrying the Night Maul, not the Paladin Bastard Sword. So let's see if we can figure out what's happening there. So the strong Paladin equipment profile is what he's using, and the equipment name list goes to the Paladin Bastard Sword. That's the problem. Paladin Bastard Sword weapon was still referring to the Night Maul. And in fact, actually, I need to change that. Weapon affinity here is actually sword two-handed, and I just need to check actually the Dragon Blade, because the Dragon Blade weapon, AnyRPG Sword Effect 1 long and two-handed sword animation profile. Sword Effect 1 long. Okay, so if we look at the Paladin Bastard Sword weapon, we want to change the default sound hit to Sword Effect 1 long, and then change that animation profile from two-handed mace to two-handed sword. Okay, that is a lot better. And I think now, I'm interested in seeing, we don't have a Bastard Sword graphic. Okay, the current one is pretty good though. I mean, that really looks kind of almost exactly like the sword that we've got equipped, so that's a pretty good match anyway. So let's save that, and we'll jump back into the game. Okay, let's take a look and just see where that sword is right now. Alright, so it's not bad. Pretty close. So we need to make some adjustments to it. So let's just get it upright in his hands in that particular pose, sort of sitting through the gloves there. So we'll hit E, we'll rotate it upwards, we'll rotate it kind of like this a little bit, and then W, we'll move it up a little bit and over. And now we need it to come this way a little bit. There we go. That's pretty good. I don't really care about the bottom hand too incredibly much. We're not using like IK to keep the hand in line with the sword, so we're just sort of relying on the animations and our manual placement of the sword. Just a little bit that way, I think. And now it's not like sort of over or eating his thumb. We could probably move this down just a tad, and then that way it looks like his hands actually, like his bottom hand's actually on it. Okay, so we'll leave it like that, and now this Euler angles are not going to actually update until we allow them the update method to run. So when we look at these Euler angles, yeah, we see basically the last angle is matching what's up there, but of course the real angles are not. So, or the rest of them aren't. So let's go update those. So we need the Paladin Bastard Sword holdable object. We're just going to re-add an inspector over here. And now we are going to copy all this stuff into the regular physical position and physical rotation slots, because those are the ones for when the weapon is held in his hand. Scale is still 1, and now we copy these Euler angles into the rotation box. Okay, and let's just save that. Right, we can't save it while the game is running, so I just want to go back into the scene and take a look and make sure that the grip still sort of looks okay. Oh wow, this animation is a little messed up. Yeah, if you look at the way he's standing right now, his hands aren't really matching up. So this is what I was talking about. We're not using like inverse kinetics here. We are just relying on the animations. So this is probably because these animations come from a model that doesn't match the bone structure exactly. So we have to deal with Unity's ability to retarget, and it looks like in this case the retargeting isn't incredibly accurate, but there's nothing we can really do about that. So for now, this is kind of good enough for me. I don't know that there would be much of a way at this point to position this weapon so that the bottom hand properly looks like it's on it. So let's just watch these guys attack this zombie for a little bit and just sort of examine these animations. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. They're doing what they're supposed to. He only has one auto attack available to him. So let's, I just want to make sure that my weapon is still okay as well. I haven't gone back and I haven't fixed all of the other weapons for these new proper Euler values. And so basically they just work because their values are values that are actually valid, pretty much. And this is, I mean, by valid, I mean like Unity has to convert stuff to quaternions and back from quaternions if you give it Euler values. And apparently there's like an infinite amount of Euler values that line up to any quaternion value, I think, and some of them just don't translate well in both directions. So my Paladin Bastard Sword looks fine, the Paladin's Paladin Bastard Sword looks fine. But I did notice one thing. That sword is supposed to be doing 50 damage to the zombie. Let's go back in and just take a look at the zombie, because let me just pause this for a second. I'll show you what I mean here. So if we go to the Paladin Bastard Sword and we look at the weapon for it, you can see it's got a damage modifier of 50. But right now, I don't think the Paladin is doing 50 damage. The zombie has no armor, so it has no damage reduction. So what we would expect to see, because there's nothing in the game engine right now that would make a character weaker or make his attacks do less because he's lower level. It's just basically just straight up strength. You do more damage because you have more strength as you get higher level. So this means that every swing that our paladin takes with the hammer, we should be seeing basically 50 health drop off that zombie, and I only saw 25 there. And since the paladin is level 5 and you get basically 5 damage through strength per level, this means that the paladin is not currently getting the additional damage he should be getting from that weapon. Or I mean the knight. The paladin obviously is going to have the same problem. And actually, let's go back in and just take a look at my character, because my character right now is wearing enough armor that his hit points should be higher than you would expect for this level. So, interestingly enough, my character's hit points are getting a buff from the stuff that I have equipped. What I'm interested to see though is, I guess I need to fix the character panel first. So let's go in and fix the character panel, because that was actually the main thing that I wanted to get done in this episode today. So if we look at our character panel here, we have a character panel script, and our character panel script references all this stuff right here. And these are the character buttons. So let's go in and look at our character button script. Our character button script has an equipment slot associated with it. And it looks like actually it's the wrong equipment slot too. So the helm slot is for the helm, and the shoulders slot needs to be the shoulders. The chest slot is properly the chest. Main hand and offhand look good. Actually, I think this is going to fix a bug that I had before, where I noticed that I couldn't properly unequip my shoulders. Probably because the shoulder slot wasn't set right. Okay, good. So the rest of the slots are set properly. Let's just pop this into 2D mode so we can see this here. So what we want to do now is basically, we have in our character panel, the character panel script, and we have a method somewhere in here basically. There. On stat changed plus equals update stats description. Okay, so we have a clear button method on here. And we have this equip equipment method. Update stats description. So basically when we do this stuff, we want to go through and we just want to set our icons properly. So let's just take a look at when this equipment method is being run. Okay. So this is basically the only place we're running this method from a slot script, which basically means the slot script is in our inventory. So if we right click on the slot script on our inventory, it's going to attempt to equip equipment through the character panel. That's not what we want though. What we want basically is for the character equipment manager to equip that directly. So we can reference the player manager because this is a slot script. Actually, you know, I think equipment actually technically just has a my item as equipment dot use. And I believe this function right here, let's just go take a look at it, will actually equip the equipment. Perfect, yeah, character equipment manager dot equip this. Good. So going back to this method here, this method is basically not used by anything anymore. And since the character panel is no longer responsible for equipping a character, then I'm going to repurpose this method right here. We are going to call it update equipment images. No, you know what? Update. What do we call these things again? Equipment buttons. Update character buttons. Yeah, okay. Update character buttons. We no longer need one of these, and basically all this stuff becomes useless. And basically everything inside these becomes useless. Because all we want this method to do basically is just go and set the image on the character button. So this looks pretty good. I'm going to take this update character buttons method, and we actually have to run this from somewhere. And I think basically the update stats description is pretty much where we want to run it. Okay, good. So every time that the stats description gets updated, we should see the buttons getting updated too, which is right, because all of our other methods in the game update that stats description when anything changes, so that seems like a good place to have this. So now we just need to go here and now we need to look at these character buttons. There's a little bit of refactoring to be done here in the character button, because the character button is really no longer responsible for equipping anything. And so when we do this pointer click here, we can drop equipment on here. The equipment is referring to an equipment slot, and I don't believe we need that anymore. So I'm just going to go to the definition of equipment. And let me just look at the scriptable object for a piece of equipment, like our night mall. That's really interesting. Equip slot. Ah. Oh, right. No, of course, that's an if statement. Okay, so all this statement right here is basically doing is just checking to make sure that if the item that we're dropping on this thing actually matches, yeah, the equipment slot. No, so that's fine. We can keep that there. And then we don't need to do equip equipment. I think what we actually need to do is basically just tell the equipment to use itself, which should cause it to auto equip. That might work. I guess we'll find out when we test this. Okay, and this entire method basically needs to be rewritten. This hand script drop here, I think that actually needs to be moved up here. I think I am just actually honestly going to comment this entire thing out. don't even really think that the set equipment or de-equip equipment is even necessary. The equipment definitely doesn't need a character button anymore. Let's find out where this thing is being referenced from. It has nothing to do with items, it all has to do... Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, we still don't need to keep a reference to a character button. There are other ways, basically, to do this. So let's just comment that out. And I don't think we need this anymore either. Basically, this is the only thing we need. And it should pretty much be done at the beginning of the update visual button. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this dot equipped equipment let's first make it a variable just to check what the current equipment is. And then let's see this. What I want to do right here is basically just avoid like resetting a bunch of stuff if we don't need to. Although I guess like technically Unity is not going to change anything, I don't think, if it's not set. So maybe this may not even be necessary. Let's see here. So if this is a character, so player manager.my instance.my character.my character equipment manager .my current equipment contains key, and we want to hand it our key, which is equipment slot. No, equipment slot with a lowercase. Yeah, there. So basically, if the player manager has anything in this equipment slot, then our equipped equipment equals let's see, my current equipment slot. So what this will do is basically set the equipped equipment to whatever's in that slot. If the current equipment doesn't contain that key, then it must be null, obviously. Okay, now basically we can check if it's not null. If it is null, we set it to nothing. If it is not null, we do that. What does this reset display method do? Let's go take a look at that. Reset display updates the status description, which updates the character buttons. That looks like it's a potential for a loop there. So basically we want update stats description to be, honestly, this method I don't think this method honestly has any business resetting the display, because like we used to equip things through these buttons, but we're not really equipping them through the buttons anymore, which means that this update visual should be called like sort of as the end of this process, not essentially as the beginning of it. So really we should not be calling reset display. And when reset display is called, it has no business doing update stats description. So that's good. Okay, so I think basically the only time this update visual should be called actually, you know, it looks like these might not even be needed either. Basically that was just setting equipped equipment to false, but every time we update the visual, that will happen. And from now on, updating the visual is basically all that those buttons will be responsible for. As soon as we ask it to update our character buttons as a result of updating our stats description as a result of anything changing, then the buttons basically just go check the character's equipment manager and see if he's got anything in that slot, and then either set themselves or set themselves to null. So I think that's okay. So let's just go check and see. I don't know if we're actually going to get it updated. What do we have here? Error messages. Okay, we got to fix a little bit of stuff first here. Let's see first. Okay, so yeah, do it directly. This is the fix me code. Perfect, because we recognized a while ago that we were going to be changing this in a way that was going to make it incompatible. So if we look at our current equipment right here, what are we doing here? We're equipping an item through the equipment manager. Okay, so all we need to do basically is instead just call this right here, because we already have an unequip method in here. And we just hand it the equipment slot. And that should work. We do the exact same thing right here. Just directly hand it the equipment slot. We don't track character buttons anymore, so that check really doesn't do anything. But I think we just need to update this statement down here. Okay, so what we're doing right here is we're unequipping any two-hand main hand if we have an offhand. So this is actually main hand, and main hand does not equal null. Okay. That looks, I think, okay. Let's save that and see what other issues we have. So this is the handle left click. And if the slot is empty, we're checking if our hand script has equipment in it, and if it is, then we are going to unequip it. But to do that, we're going to use a slightly different method. Basically, what we will do is, this is slot script, so it only applies to the character. So player manager.my instance.my character equipment manager dot unequip, and we just hand it the hand script movable as equipment dot equip slot. There. So that should tell our player manager to unequip whatever is in that slot and pop it in the bag. look at the unequip, I just want to see, does this have a slot index? Perfect, it does. So we actually want to send it the slot index, because basically what that'll do is ensure that we unequip it into this slot. And we want that because if we take an item and grab it from the character panel and go to stick it in our bags, and then we click in the bag on a certain slot and instead it just appears on some other random first slot, it's going to be a little confusing. So we want to send that slot index. Let's see what other issues we have here. Okay, so this is the hand script deleting an item. So we'll need to make a little bit of a change here. Okay, so basically the items used to have their character buttons attached to them so that we are able to unequip or basically like sort of just delete them right here. We need a new method of doing this though, so we're going to change that, and I think what we need to do basically is check if this thing is actually equipped on our character in some other way. So I think the best way to do that is going to basically have a method so that we can query the character. No, you know what? We just need to query the character's equipment manager. Okay, so I know how we can do that. So let's see. Else, this isn't going to be as simple as like a single if statement. So let's just write this out in comments just to make it easier for ourselves to remember what we're going to be doing here. First, we want to get this item's equipment slot. Next, we want to query the equipment manager on the character to see if he has an item in this item slot and if it is the item we are dropping. Yeah, that should do, I think. Basically, if it is, then we will unequip it and then destroy it. Okay, so now let's write the code to actually do all those comments that we just put in there. So first thing we're going to do is get the item's equipment slot. So basically, if item is equipment, then if item as equipment dot equip slot. Let's see, actually what we want to do is we want to check that. We want to check if the character, no, the player manager. If the player manager is equipment manager, basically. So player manager dot my instance dot my character dot my character equipment manager dot my current equipment dot contains key, this slot, and okay, so basically we're just checking if there is equipped equipment in the slot that this equipment is. Then we want to compare and basically see if this equipment is the equipment in that slot. Yeah. So we do that by adding this, and then adding that in as the key, and then comparing that to the item as the equipment. And if all that stuff is true, then that means that this item is the item that is equipped in the character's equipment manager in that slot, meaning we can unequip it. And then, now that that equipment, by virtue of being unequipped, is in our bags with a slot attached to it, we can clear the slot, which has the effect of basically getting rid of the only reference that we have to this item, and when the last reference to an item is gone, the item itself is gone. So this should basically have the effect of deleting the item, because once we do drop, actually the last reference to the item is here. And basically that just sets the movable to null, which now should basically be the last reference gone. So let's save that and jump back in. Okay. And let's just jump into the game and see what happens. We have no more null references. So let's see if all of that refactoring actually resulted in a character who's got his equipment showing up in the character manager. Okay, that's pretty good news. I've got a cloth hood, I've got my shoulders, I have my robe, I have my staff, I have my gloves, my legs, and my boots. We don't have the weapon yet, but I'll deal with that in a bit. The reason basically that we don't have the weapon is because when we copied the character, like basically we cloned the player character. This is an exact clone of the player character, and in fact if we go in and we look at the character panel, let's see, character unit, something unit. Yeah, there we go. Default UMA player unit clone, and we have another default UMA player unit clone. And if we close that, we can see that this one is in the player unit. And if we go to the character creator manager, we can see this is the guy that we cloned from this guy. So when we cloned him, because the equipment manager that contains the staff is on the character connection and not the actual physical character unit, we don't get the information that there's a staff, so when it draws it, it doesn't try to put it up there. We will fix that by actually copying an equipment manager onto that guy when we first create him, and then actually equipping him. But for now, let's just check if our character panel is going to properly show anything else we equip. So we'll try the Dragon Blade here, and we didn't unequip that item on our back, and we didn't update the bone staff either. So interestingly enough, throwing this on our back actually did get rid of the two-hand. So I think this was some of our equip unequip logic that may be a little faulty here. Let's try throwing the initiate staff on. Rune sword is unique. Yeah, okay, so we've wow, and now we have two copies of the initiate staff. Okay, so we clearly have some more issues in here that we have to fix. So let's go jump back into the code and take a look at that stuff. So let's see what happens when we right-click an item. So if we right-click an item in our bag, let's sort of trace what happens there. Basically, we just go straight to use item. So let's go to that. And let's just go see what equipment.use does. So basically, equipment manager.use just tells the equipment manager to equip this item. So that's okay. That's pretty much what we want. And let's go see what happens when we equip the new item. So when we right-click on the item, we check if it contains, if if our current equipment has an item in that slot, and the item in that slot isn't null, we're just going to unequip it. So let's just go in and just try this much of it actually, just with the bone staff. I'm just going to go here and see if the current equipment contains equipment slot and the current equipment is not null. We should be destroying the object. Nulling out the equipment slot. Okay. I think we have an override of this in the player equipment manager that's going to do a little more than that. So let's go take a look at that. So this notify an equipment changed here. Has on equipment changed, and everybody that subscribed to this was the action bar manager, the player animator, the player ability manager, player stats, player combat, and the save manager. But it looks like our character panel is not subscribed to that event. So let's just go up and see if our character panel subscribes to anything. It does. And we do the player unit spawn basically. Interesting. We are subscribing to the on stat changed method. So I'm just going to see if that's being fired or not, and then just want to see if this one's being fired or not. see if this is being fired or not. Okay, so let's jump back into the game here. We will go over to Wizards RS. And so we have a staff on right now. Let's right click on this staff, the initiate staff right here. Okay. So the initiate's staff is now properly equipped, maybe. Okay. And the bone staff is unequipped. But we still have this initial reference to the initiate's staff right there. And we definitely need to fix that. So if we follow like basically our chain of events back to where we actually equip this thing. Let's just go into the character panel and look at some of this commented out code here, because I think when we equipped stuff, what was it? It's the character buttons. Yeah, there we go. No, it doesn't look like we did any specific magic there. Okay, so in our slot script, when we use the item, let's just go back to that. And basically we tell our equipment manager to equip the item. Let's just go see what base.use does. Nothing. Okay. When we go to the equipment manager and we tell it to equip the new item, that's fine. We unequip the old one. However, at no point are we clearing the item's slot, basically, in the inventory. I think that's actually part of the issue here. So let's just see what that new item.mySlot.clear method does. Okay, that looks okay. And basically, I just want to find all references to this my slot because at some point, there we go, item remove. Okay. You know what? This may actually be the code that we should be using. Let's just go take a look at that remove item code. Okay. Okay, so where is this remove code called from? We call it when we complete an objective, when we use a castable item, when we use a currency item, when we use a quest start item, when we complete a quest item, and when we use a bag. So given that the remove method is called in the use method of every other thing except for equipment, it kind of makes sense to me that it should be there. So when we right clicked on that item, basically we called its use method. Yeah, there. Okay. And just keeping in line with everything else, we should now call its remove method. And that should basically go down into the base, check its slot, remove the item from the slot, set the item slot to null so that we won't have weird references to it hanging around. And that will probably be okay. There was one other thing that I wanted to do here, and I think I messed this up somehow. So basically, no, actually that sort of looks okay. Let's try it again and just see if we get any issues here. Okay, so we're gonna, nope, we're not gonna load up this game. We're gonna fix a null reference issue we just caused apparently. Okay, right. That we don't need because I just put that in there and I have replaced that with the whole use code. Yeah, okay, so I just forgotten to remove that. So let's see now. Right, and we're going to load this guy up again. Okay. Looking at our character panel. So let's see what happens when I right click on the initiate staff. Okay, that's good. Kind of. Basically, or not actually. That's a little odd. So the initiate staff is overlaid with the bone staff, basically, which means that the bone staff's basically its physical object never got destroyed. So let's see. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on there, because I thought I put a bunch of debug statements in, which I sort of expected to see. So first, I just want to confirm that the bone staff weapon has an affinity of staff and an equip slot of main hand. And the initiate's staff weapon has an affinity of staff and an equip slot of main hand. Okay, great. So we should be attempting the unequip here. Okay, now this will give us an idea of what we're trying to unequip, which slot, etc. If current equipment dot contains key, current equipment slot is not null. So I just want to see, like, did this run or not? Because it kind of looks like it didn't, and it should have. Because we should have actually seen that thing get destroyed. And I'm just going to go clear the log to get rid of all the messages that were in there before, because I want to see exactly what happens only from this point forward when I click this thing. Ah, that was neat. And do you know what the difference was? The difference was we didn't have the character panel open that time. So, when we had the character panel open, something different happened. Let me just click the bone staff. That's good. We got our initiate staff back. And I can swap these things all day long, and it doesn't look like we have any weird invalid references or anything popping up. So that's good news. Let's try this out. Okay, there's our first issue. So I just tried to equip the dragon blade, and it didn't unequip the staff. So let me just go take a look at the Dragon Blade weapon here. And it has a weapon affinity of sword two-hand and an equip slot of main hand. That's really interesting. Okay, I'm going to clear the log again and see what happens, because theoretically this thing should be telling the initiate staff to unequip itself, but it didn't, so let's see what happened there. So we told it to unequip the main hand. Wow, that's really neat. So basically, we told it to destroy the object and it didn't. And that makes absolutely no sense. So why did we not destroy the object? Or the question is, did we destroy the object, and did we have like more than one object hiding on us in there? So let's look for an initiate staff, and we have one initiate staff. Okay, and let's unpause it and equip the initiate staff. And then now we have two initiate staffs. Okay, so this is the problem. We actually did destroy an initiate staff, but for some reason we've got two of them. And that really shouldn't be happening. So let's reload the scene here, because I want to try to figure out at what point we suddenly end up with two initiate staffs. It's an interesting issue. So we're going to load this guy up here. And we're going to pause it, and we're going to look in our scene, and we have no initiate staffs. So that's good news. Now we're going to right click on our initiate staff, and we're going to check the scene, and we have one initiate staff. Okay, that's still good news. So we swap the sword out. Okay, and now we have one dragon blade and no initiate staffs. Okay, quite interesting. Now we swap in the bone staff. We have no initiate staff. We have one bone staff. We have no dragon blades. Okay, so let's pop the initiate staff back in. This is quite an interesting error to try to recreate because it's not working. So now we pop in our bone staff, and we have no initiate staffs. Okay. Huh. Okay, let's go back and forth between initiate staff and bone staff a bunch of times. We still have no initiate staffs. We've only got one bone staff. And I don't seem to be able to reproduce this issue, which is quite interesting because I seem to recall last time this not working properly. But there was one other difference last time, and let's see if that has anything to do with it. I opened up this window here and I closed it. And then I equipped the dragon blade and the initiate staff wasn't destroyed. Okay. So opening the character panel definitely is the source of this issue. Let's go take a look at our UMA unit in the character panel. Okay, so our UMA unit in the character panel has an equipment manager on him because we added an equipment manager to him. Let's close that again. I think I know like where this is being recreated. I just need to sort of figure it out in the code here. So if we go play and we go load game and we load up Wizards R Us, this is great. We open up his backpack, we put on an initiate staff, we pause this, we look in our hierarchy, we've got one initiate staff. Awesome. Everything's good. We hit C, we open up the character panel, we pause it, and we have two initiate staffs. There we go. Both of them sitting on our regular UMA player unit. Okay, so that explains why two things are happening. It explains why, number one, we don't see the initiate staff on the character in the character panel, and number two, we see an extra initiate staff on our regular character. So this is very, very likely due to an attempt to equip our player manager's character rather than the preview unit's character. So let's see if we can figure out where that's happening. It's very likely we've probably got an on open window method here somewhere, maybe on enable. That's really interesting. We don't have an on open window method here. Okay. Setting the... Oh, there we go. Receive open window notification. That's basically our on open window method. This is sent to us from our parent window frame. So it looks like our set preview target code is likely the one at fault here. We set a target ready callback here. Then we jump down into here. We grab the UMA avatar. Yes, that's our problem. I think I accidentally put this code in here when I was doing the initial refactoring to turn that into an equipment manager. So what we actually want to do is we want to equip our preview unit instead. So basically, we're going to be doing sort of a similar thing to what we're doing up here. Let's see, we want to grab the equipment manager, so we will make a reference to a character equipment manager here. And we'll grab it off of the preview unit, which is the correct unit that we want to be grabbing it off of. We're going to check if it's not null. And then if it's not null, first we want to check to make sure the character's equipment manager isn't null. And if the character's equipment manager isn't null, then basically we're going to make a copy of the current equipment array dictionary. And then we can run the equip character method. Okay. And then we can comment out that because that was just, I think, an accident. I don't think we need that at all. Okay, so this looks okay because now we're going to basically give the player's settings to instead the character preview unit and get him to basically show his weapons there. So let's now go and try that. I think this will work. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, good. So now when I open this thing up, our character preview unit properly has a bone staff on him. And when I right click on my item right here, it goes away. When I click back here, everything looks okay. I can swap back and forth between bone staff and initiate staff. I can swap over to bone staff. I can swap out with dragon blade. I can open this up. I have my dragon blade. Okay, so we got a little bit of a bug here where when I pull an item out, it grays it out, but it doesn't clear it when I drop it in my bag. It doesn't look like it's removing this. Oh, wait a minute. If I remove this, okay, so interesting. So it removes it from the character. It doesn't update the character preview. It doesn't update his stats because it should be removing these stats as well. So we still have a little bit more work to do on that. I'm kind of interested to see what happens if I click on the bone staff right now. Okay, so when I equip that, the bone staff equips, but the character panel itself is still showing all the old stuff. And I can swap these items out. Okay, so this is pretty good as far as like the actual item management through. Yeah, that visual is still a little messed up too. Okay, so this is pretty good as far as the item management on actually swapping out. Let's see, bone staff, that, get that, if I put that on. Okay, let's try. I remember last time I equipped this and it removed something else. Okay, so it looks like we're no longer getting duplicate items. We can properly like right click on anything in our bag and it's basically going to swap out everything that it should. Staffs properly unequip both the shield and the mace. If I click a mace on, I can equip a shield. I can swap out any one-handed weapon and it's fine, and two-handed weapons, remove them all. If I have just a shield on, it swaps out the staff because you can't carry staffs and shields at the same time, and that looks okay. So the only thing we need to do now basically is just fix the character panel. The character panel is not updating when we swap these items in and out, which is probably going to lead to issues like I can probably duplicate this thing now. No, maybe not. Okay. Like these things were still gray, and we got to actually open and close this to get a properly updated character. So I think I'm going to save those fixes for the next video. We're running on about 2 hours now, so I think I'm gonna end this video now, and in the next episode we'll just finish up the rest of the character panel fixes so that it does what it's supposed to and properly updates when we swap items while it's open rather than just on open and on close. And that will probably be the last episode in the equipment manager. And after that, I'd actually really like to get my NPCs casting. So thanks for watching, and as always, if you like this type of content or you want to see something different or even just more of the same, subscribe to the Cohesion channel and just leave a note in the comments telling me what you liked or what you'd like to see different. Take care, and I'll see you next time.